Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Brisbane City Council meeting of November 2nd, 2017. We'll start out with a report out from our closed session.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, council had two matters on, had a liability claims matter concerning a claimant of AAA, and the council did approve that claim by a vote of 5-0. Council also had a matter concerning a conference with a real property negotiator, the city manager, regarding certain vacant properties, concerning the price and terms of the payment for the potential sale. Council took no action on that matter.
Thank you. And we'll call the meeting to order and start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Please note for the record that all council members are present.
Thank you. Adoption of agenda. I do have one item to mention. Staff has requested that public hearing item B be pulled from tonight's agenda because not all of the real property owners required to receive a notice of public hearing received a notice, and so the item will be brought back to the council at our meeting on November 16th, 2017.
Okay.
And that is public hearing item B.
All right. Move adoption with that amendment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Oral communications number 1. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to an item not on the agenda this evening?
So, Madam Mayor, council members, I just ask the city to disclose exactly what they're doing with the Brisbane Acres that were under closed session today. And I have a statement on record about the reasons why I think that this was an inappropriate item for the council. I know you took no action, but again, I have stated on the record that this is something that should be open, publicly noticed, more so than just under closed session. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to presentation. Brisbane Village Helping Hands. Nancy Coleman. Welcome.
First, on behalf of our board, Sherry Goodwin, Cindy Rudolph, Karen Latham, Cece Herman, who's here tonight, Elaine Porter, and myself, I want to again thank the City Council and the staff for all the support you've given us over the past several years to enable us to build and maintain Brisbane Village Helping Hands. As you know, we're a nonprofit, community-based, all-volunteer organization whose mission is to promote aging in place in Brisbane and help older residents stay connected to the community. We do this by providing volunteer services like transportation, minor home repairs and maintenance, companionship, help with technology. Recently, we've added mending as a service, which some people have used, and occasional social gatherings. We had our third social gathering in the Sunrise Room in early September, and it was very well attended. I think some of you were there. When I last addressed the council in June of 2016, we had only been operational for 3 months and had provided 11 volunteer services for our members. And just for the record, members are Brisbane residents 55 and older who pay $20 a year dues. We now have 47 members. Now, 17 months later, we've provided a total of 151 services. These have largely been transportation to medical appointments and other appointments, but also minor home repair and maintenance, help with technology, friendly visits, and mending, as I mentioned. In addition, so far, when a member has made a request at least a week in advance, which is what we recommend, we've been able to fulfill that request about 93% of the time. This is not an exact statistic because things change all the time. We every week we have new services that we provide. So this is about maybe a month and a half old. When you include requests that were made less than a week in advance, we've been able to fulfill about 86% of member requests. And I hope you'll agree that we think this is a pretty good track record so far. In addition, we've kept well within our annual budget projection of $4,000 a year. On the handout I've given you, and I guess you all have that somewhere. I gave it to the city clerk. Great. It's an approximate breakdown of our income and expenditures over the last year. One thing to note is that so far we've been able to use our database and scheduling program for no charge. It was generously donated to us for 2 years. And as the handout indicates, in March of 2018, we're going to have to start paying for this program, and it's going to be about $720 a year. This program is really central to our being able to operate as an all-volunteer organization. It really is a great program for us. In addition, in the future, we anticipate we may have to use some of our funds for keeping our background checks current. We've asked volunteers to pay for their initial background checks, and most have done that. But as we get to the point where we need to renew the background checks, we haven't quite figured out what our policy is going to be, but that's something that we may be needing to pay for in the future. As the handout indicates, since June 2016, we've added 31 new members. Our membership has grown at a faster rate than our volunteer base. As I mentioned, we now have 47 members and we have 48 volunteers. And the members who've recently signed up are people who have real needs for volunteer services at this time, particularly transportation to medical appointments. In the coming year, we'll be focusing on signing up more volunteers, particularly drivers who are available during weekdays. So if you know of anybody you think might want to get involved as a volunteer and lend a helping hand, please encourage them to contact us. Or anybody who's watching on the council meeting, we have a website, brisbanevillage.org, and our phone number is 508-2185. You can leave a message and we'll get back to you. When I last addressed the council in June 2016, we explained how our system works, how we operate day to day. I know it's not the same council that was here then, and if anybody wants me to go through this again, I'm happy to do it. Just briefly, do you guys want to hear that? Sure. Basically, a member calls our voicemail, which I just gave you the number of, and leaves a message with a service request. The person responsible for a village administration that day picks up the request and calls the member to confirm and clarify any issues regarding the request. That same person then enters the service into our scheduling system and sends out an email to our volunteers announcing the request and any other outstanding service requests. This email it has an accept button that a volunteer can click on to take on the assignment. Once they click on that button or accept the assignment by calling us or however they do it, the volunteer receives another email with all the applicable information about the service and contact information for the member so that he or she can call or email the member and make arrangements to fulfill the service. The volunteer then receives reminder emails, texts, and calls the day before the date of the assignment. That's basically how it works. In general, our systems have been working really well, and they enable to do the day-to-day administration of the village in a way that makes it sustainable as an all-volunteer organization. And this is what I was referring to. This is a program called Ride Scheduler. The financial support from both the city and the Brisbane Lions Club, which at their current levels cover our insurance and other expenses, is and will continue to be extremely important to our ongoing viability. We're really pleased with the progress the village has made, and we feel we've developed a working model that, as currently organized and funded, is sustainable. As I said, our major focus in the coming year will be to build our volunteer base so that we can continue to meet our service requests and welcome new members. We also will continue to have social gatherings twice a year for our members, volunteers, and any interested community members. I can't say enough that we could not have made the village a reality without your generous support, so many thanks. Thank you again. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Nancy.
I have a question.
Clark?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, and I appreciate what you do for the community and volunteering. So I'm sure a lot of other folks do too. They're, taking advantage of the program. My question is, how much does it cost for the background check?
It's for the DMV and criminal background check. It's $45, I believe, and it's without the DMV check. 'Cause some of our volunteers don't want to drive, so it's $36.
And who does the background checks?
It's called Verified Volunteers. It's a background check organization that's designed for volunteer organizations.
Let me ask the chief something. Chief, do we do background checks?
It's
Not
we've already when we started we checked with the city about this, and it's a different
Different
animal.
kind? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
yes,
And
we do them just for for employees, but not generally for the public.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Any questions?
I do. Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Nancy, for starting this and then reaching out and gathering your friends to be a part, because that's what it is, right?
It was a group effort,
right?
I tell
It's
you.
a total group effort. And the mission about promoting aging, promote aging in place in Brisbane, and here, I mean, you've shown that financially you're doing really well. You're staying within your means. Of course, you might need some additional funding for some of these costs that you anticipate in the future.
Yeah, we'll see. It's
Yeah.
down the road.
But it's that thing about aging in place, and of course the county has programs and different organizations that help that in the county, but being so far north, and the seat of power for the county is in Redwood City, North County gets neglected, and also a lot of folks think because you live in Brisbane, we don't need those services, we're doing just fine. But that there are a lot of seniors that could really use that help, use those services from the county. Do you see a role that maybe the city could help in providing, maybe being that conduit with the county to help educate and make sure that the county is paying attention to our seniors?
Possibly. I mean, I think that there's a lot more research that could be done about what the needs of seniors in our community are. Brisbane Village Helping Hands is not in really a position to do that research, so the city may be in a better position. I don't. I think, if the city wants to undertake any kind of needs assessment or something like that, that would be great. I personally don't. We haven't done that as an organization, so I can't really speak to that. Mm-hmm. And we're pretty much in a position that we're not in a position to do more than what we're doing right now, other than any kind of help from what we do that would augment what the city would do. But I think if the city does have the resources and the means and the will to do that kind of research and act from it, that would be great.
So Clay, I got a question for you. Doing some kind of senior needs assessment. Of course, we do fund senior programs, but what? I mean, we have all these different subcommittees that do various things. Is there an existing subcommittee that could, maybe have a meeting and have folks from Helping Hands, to explore some of those potential opportunities with the county?
Absolutely not. Of course. I mean, if you have a council subcommittee that you would like to, I mean, I don't see where it really fits with any particular subcommittee at the moment. So maybe you'd want to have an ad hoc subcommittee.
Okay. We're going to be having an election fairly soon, and we'll have a new council, and then the council gets together. But maybe that might be something that the new council talks about in Saito. Maybe we'll form an ad hoc committee to,
Well,
to
we're a growing population, the seniors.
for sure.
Yeah, I'm there.
I don't
Yeah, and when we just recently approved of the senior housing project at on San Bruno Avenue, so I can see your organization helping people who could potentially live there to help them age in place. So I think it's really fantastic what you're doing. It really serves like the people who have lived here the longest, to allow them to continue to live here and be independent.
We hope so. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. I do have one item that was corrected. So there was the minutes of September 7th, 2017. I had asked for them to be pulled at the last meeting, and they're back here, but the city attorney hadn't had a chance to review them when they got posted. So
Page 2.
that's so this is on the closed session item. So I've asked for him to take a look at the closed session item in the minutes of September 7th. So it's on page 1 under item A. And the language that he's suggesting in place of what's there is to say, council met in closed session because based on existing facts and circumstances, council discussed whether litigation should be initiated at this time. Council voted 4-1 not to initiate litigation at this time. Mayor Liu voted no because she believed options other than litigation are available at this time. Not that it said I voted no, and it didn't explain why. So I asked him to clarify that by putting in that brief explanation. So are there any other items on the consent calendar?
Not on a consent calendar.
Yes.
On page 2.
Okay. So
On a
Of those
consent
same
calendar.
minutes. So,
should we pull the item A and then
Yeah.
move to approve the remaining items B and
and
C?
I wanted to pull item B for one small clarification or
Okay.
change.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve item C?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, item A. Okay, so I've made my changes to the closed session.
Okay.
And then, Mark?
On page 2, second paragraph in the bottom, starts off that Mayor Liu made a motion, seconded by CM Conway, to approve consent calendar. I don't recall you making a motion.
I usually don't make the motion.
Yeah, I know. So can we go back and check that? I can approve this with the caveat that you'll do your due diligence and let us all know, right? Okay.
Okay.
So,
Good catch.
I think it was probably you that made the motion.
yeah, that's what I
So,
was thinking of.
with the clarifications, you made a motion, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
And then on,
Item B,
B.
City Council minutes of October 12th.
one clarification on the adoption of the agenda, the first line, Councilmember Conway requested to close a meeting in memory of the Las Vegas shooting victims and the North Bay fire victims, and it was actually Councilmember O'Connell.
That's correct.
And that was the end at the Las Vegas shooting victims, and Mayor Liu added the addition of the North Bay fire victims.
Correct.
And I couldn't tell you who made the motion. I think we would need to review that, and again,
If you could just review that whole section there, and we'll rely upon you.
Okay.
Yes.
So is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Second my motion.
Okay. All right. Moving on to public hearing. Item A, consider introduction of ordinance number 622, zoning text amendment RZ-2-17, zoning text amendment to implement housing element program HB1G, clarifying existing definitions related to office uses and streamline rooftop solar energy systems installations. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. This is kind of a cleanup ordinance amendment. There are three discrete pieces to it. One is to implement an adopted program from the housing element, which is to explicitly identify single-room occupancy housing as a conditionally permitted use in the SCRO Southwest Bayshore area. And again, that's a requirement of state law and the housing element. The next is to eliminate some language in the zoning ordinance to eliminate a use category which isn't defined in the code anymore. I think it was a sort of a relic term. It was in there and it was removed, but it still shows up in certain places in the ordinance with no definition. And that is for the professional services land use. So we're just proposing that be deleted. Any of the professional services all fall within the category of office. So no change, substantive change there. Then the only substantive issue tonight is the height exemption for flush-mounted rooftop solar systems, and that would be to allow systems that are no more than 24 inches from the roof be allowed even if the building is at the maximum building height. So that would be the only real substantive change. Planning Commission reviewed these changes in May, recommended approval, and we'd recommend you introduce Ordinance 622. I'd be glad to take any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions?
No.
None.
Okay. Is there a motion?
No, it's a public hearing.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Open up the public hearing. Anyone would like to speak?
Hi, Dana Dilworth. Since this is about the housing element, I am wanting to suggest that you include some language that would allow for what's now being called tiny houses or modular homes. I know that in SCRO category, it allows mobile homes, but mobile homes are a little different than homes that are constructed on flatbeds. In my opinion, some are not truly mobile, and so I'm asking that you consider or add to this some language that would include tiny houses, and it might fit a little more with the discussions for session B that you had, because that deals with more portions along Bayshore. But again, between the two amendments that you're about to do, I would love that we talk about tiny houses or, alternative living structures or whatever kind of language you could come up with. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? Okay.
Motion to close public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay. Council discussion?
John, can you comment on Dana's suggestion, please?
Well, I think the issue of tiny houses is somewhat sort of not any of the policy discussion the Planning Commission had. So, I think there's been a lot of interest for those type of land uses. I would recommend, if the council's interested, that be probably a sort of a separate discussion you initiate or have the Planning Commission initiate, not just really drop it in here. As I don't know, you have what is a tiny house? How do you define it? What are to add a definition and a permitted use with having no basis to really evaluate it or entitle it, I think is it's a little risky. So if you want to review the issue, I think that's probably a separate issue you want to direct the Planning Commission to consider.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was wondering if we want to also have our affordable housing subcommittee take a look at that.
Well, I think that's something that I don't want to speak for you, Cliff, but from our conversations, I thought that was something that the affordable housing subcommittee is interested.
Yeah.
So I don't know that. I think maybe we can just give direction to staff to, bring this forward to the Planning Commission before it comes to the affordable housing subcommittee, because I think we're on the same page on that, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go through the Planning Commission then. Okay. Thank you for the suggestion, Anna. Okay. Any other discussion?
Now, I make a motion to propose ordinance number 622. And
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Okay, we're going to pass over item B. And we'll move on to new business. Item A, consider adoption of resolution number 2017-47 to increase fees for the after-school program from $120 a month, or $1,068 per year, to $160 a month for residents, or $1,440 per year. Staff report, please.
Yes. So this is an item that's being brought forward based on the increase that the City Council approved back in September for our part-time recreation leaders and senior recreation leader. The City Council adopted a budget that subsidized the program approximately $13,000 a year. When we increased the rate, that would increase the amount that the city would need to subsidize. Staff calculated what the new cost would be to have the same subsidy. That cost would be, as it states in the staff report, $160 a month. Then staff also looked at changing that process from having it be a per month basis to a per year basis. And the reason being is months are hard to calculate exactly when it comes to after school programs, because each month is different. So we were charging a different amount each month based on the number of days in the month. So what we are going to do from now on is take that base same $160 a month and calculate it as $1,440 a year and charge it in 10 equal payments over the course of the school year. So that way one month isn't more than another month or less than another month. So that was part of this as well. The Parks and Recreation Commission discussed this at their meeting, and they thought that raising it in order to keep the subsidy the same was acceptable. There was some conversation that even with the rate at $160 per month, it still would only increase the cost from about $1.69 an hour to $2.23 an hour for the program. So even that may be considered a little bit low, especially with some of the ideas that are beginning to float up to the surface with the programming, trying to do more enhancement. But the conversation at the Parks and Recreation Commission was, at this point in time, just cover the additional cost of the part-time staff employees. And as we get more enhancement programs, we would look at that this year as potentially as a separate cost to parents. So only parents who want to be in the enhanced programs would be in them. And that way they wouldn't feel obligated. They don't have to pay more than they can afford. And then if the enhancements are something that everybody wants, to try and incorporate that into the rate at a future date. And we are beginning to bring in more programs. Starting in January, we're looking at having a program, a more STEM-oriented program on Thursdays. We're also working with BDW to try and find a time for them to do instrument making. Unfortunately, the time for them to do instrument making is the same time that the STEM people would like to be here as well. So when it rains, it pours kind of thing. And I know that our senior recreation leader is also looking at trying to bring in additional arts and craft person to come in and do additional programming. So we're beginning to, we're working with the parents to really create the program that the parents want. And as such, raising it to the, we've talked to parents, the $160 a month seems to be within what they were talking about. the Parks and Recreation Commission chair talked with Dee Dee Porter about it, and who raised this issue initially about the after-school programs. And she was saying that something in the 30% range would be acceptable, she thought, to parents. The $160 is acceptable, is within that 30%. We brought this to the City Council previously in October. At the October 12th meeting, Councilmember Conway stated that he had some concerns about it. We talked with Councilmember Conway, and his perspective, and it's a very valid perspective, is to let the program really achieve its goals this year before you raise it all the way to the $160, but instead do an interim rate increase of $140 for this year. What that would do is not raise it as much for the parents as and work with and build their trust over the school year to be able to show the value of going to the full 160. Hopefully, Councilmember Conway, I'm not putting words in your mouth or not misquoting you on that. And the only difference would be is if you go to the $160, we would be able to cover the full cost. If you go to the $140, instead of subsidizing $13,000 a year, we'd be subsidizing about $19,000 a year. Additionally, any rate increase will not go into effect until after the program comes back in January, because you need a 45-day period between the time you adopt the new fee and the time it can go into effect. So, the difference, if you want to go to the $140, that's, a good solution as well. It would cost the city about $6,000, $7,000 more a year, but that's, something that we could probably handle within our city's budget.
Okay. Thank you, Stuart. And can you give us an update on the status of the hiring process, if we've received any applications
Sure.
since we've raised the rate?
Yes, we have received 2 applications. We're in the midst of working through hiring both of those.
Great.
So we are slowly getting up to where we need to be. Unfortunately, we're not. Our goal is to get to 10 employees. So that way we would want to have 7 there full, at all times, and then have 3 in rotation, so that way people can take breaks, or if people's schedules change that we don't have, we're not short-staffed. So if once we hire these 2, we will be up to 5. The way we're making it work right now is our preschool teacher, who's also a senior recreation leader, is working 3 days at the program. And then the other person who works in the preschool program is working 2 days in the program, opposite the 3 that our senior recreation leader is working. And what they're doing is they're working through their childcare issues with each other, because that's the issue for them, is that they have young children who aren't of this age. And then also our supervisor is there on a daily basis. So that's how we're covering it, with having enough adults there, but we are still working to try and get additional staff.
And once we were able to, if we are able to hire the, the amount that we're asking for or that we hope for, would we be able to have separate staffing by age group for like K through 2 and 3 through 5?
Right. We're already doing a lot of that right now. Even with the short staff, we are trying to work through that, because we hear that from the parents. There are certain activities that, having 5th graders and kindergartners in the same activity don't work very well. There are other activities where it works wonderfully. And so we are very mindful of that at this point. And we are, we had a meeting with parents. I had a meeting with parents last Wednesday night. We talk about, as programs begin to improve, less parents provide input. So when we first had the subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Commission, we probably had about 10 parents there. I had a meeting at the end of September, and I probably had 5 or 6 parents. This meeting I had 2. So I think that, and one of the both parents were very supportive of the changes that have been being made. They thought that they were going very well, that we're heading in the right direction. And, there are still some things that they think we could work on. One of the ones was trying to work with BDW and trying to get them to come to the program, or provide some method for people who are in our program to get down to BDW. And, I've talked to BDW about that, and we're still trying to figure out what the best way is. I mean, our challenge at this point is, having 2 of our recreation leaders go down and take children to that on Mondays would be very difficult because that would leave us with only 3 people. So we're still working through that. And I know, I think there are parents who are offering to walk other people's kids or to bring other people's children to the program. So we're trying to work through that with BDW.
Okay, great. And that you mentioned that there's 2 new programs starting in January, the STEM program and the instrument making. So are those, if those go forward, are they going to be through like rec? Do you have to be enrolled in rec or?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like the current programs which are through the school.
Right. These will be through the recreation program.
Okay. And if you're not in rec, then you wouldn't have access to those. So
At this point, that would be the way that we would do it because, this is going to be associated with our after-school
it'd
program.
be part of, why you're paying that increased rate.
No, this would be in addition to that fee.
Oh, there would be an
yes.
additional fee.
So the per child, it would be $10 per class for for both the instrument and for the STEM class. The art class is actually going to be more if we are actually able to pull it off because that one it's $20 because there's a lot more costs for the material.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, you wanna-
Well, yeah, since Stuart, brought my name in the staff report, I just wanted to.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. If you didn't want me to.
No. No, you paraphrased it well, Stuart. Thank you for that. But just to add to that, this year we really stumbled out of the blocks. And there was a lot of backlash on that. And,
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys. I'm sure that you heard it as well as I did, from some pretty irate parents. And so, and it's not necessarily, I would say, because we lacked the effort. It was just, we have a great economy and just couldn't hire people and didn't have enough bodies. But when we're turning kids away, that just reflects bad on the community. It reflects on the whole organization. So that was also one of the reasons that I think, that there's a lot of programs that we do have large subsidized programs like the swimming pool and stuff like that. And that this is, with the kids, and I think it's probably best to step into it and see how the program goes along. And then by that time, hopefully, we get the addition with the bathrooms and the portables up at BES and, kind of really say, now you're getting your money's worth, Right now, if it wasn't for the economy, it would still be the same. But it's because we can't hire people. We've had to boost almost $4 an hour just for starting. So, that's not necessarily the city's fault, per se. It's just a great economy, and you can't hire people. So we had to do it, and I think it's a good way of doing business, not to give cities money away, saying, oh, yeah, let's just throw it out there, but, just step into it while the program grows. We, charge appropriately, not just hit them on it and boom, $160, and, we still got not enough people, and it would, again, reflect that. Well, my child was turned away, and it's like, so I don't want to get back into that situation. I think we should just step into it financially, allow people to adjust to it. So,
Is there still a waiting list?
Yes, the waiting list is still over 10.
so that's my 2 cents or $20.
Well, even with increased fees, the cost of the program directly until we hire people is not going to go up, but we're expending higher cost people to have managers step in to cover our lack of staffing. Correct?
We are having higher paid people step in to cover the lack of staffing. This increase would go into effect in January if you adopt it tonight.
And when you say it's a 10-month-a-year program, so this isn't the summer
No,
at all?
no,
It doesn't include the summer?
no. This is the beginning of. School starts in August and ends in June.
Okay, so it's how many hours a day program?
If you are
Starts with 2.
It's
Three and a
two. It's if you're in kindergarten, it's 3.5. Because we run from 2:30 until 6. The majority of the children are kindergartners, and I will bet you Clark and Lori know the schedule better than I do. But I think the kindergartners get out at 2:30.
Yeah, there's like a
second
kindergarten from
graders-
2 to 2:30, and then
First graders,
rec starts at
kindergartners,
2:30.
and second graders.
Get out at 2:30, and then the rest of the children get out at 3 or 3:30.
3.
3 for the fourth for 3, 4, and 5,
And it goes until,
and it goes until 6.
okay.
So it's 3.5 hours for some, and it's 3 hours for others.
And they pay the same rate,
Yes,
no matter if they're there for 3.5 or
yes.
longer. And
Because I mean, if you start working through that, there are some of the kindergartners could get picked up at 5. So trying to break it out as
Yeah,
an hour
it's
on
too
an
complicated.
hourly basis becomes very difficult.
So, how many staff members do you need to have, and so that you can accommodate the wait list?
The challenge for us to
Is it the
accommodate
portable?
it's the facilities.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, as we talked about it during the CIP meeting, the facility itself is rated for 49.
Yeah.
So when we have all 65 and it rains, they go into the school. When we have 65, throughout the day, we are shuffling people through, keeping people in the having people in the portable, having people outside. So I mean, we try our best not to have everybody in the portable at any given time. So if we went to 75, it would be harder to keep those numbers.
And the new portable that they're attempting to get bidded out would have a capacity of how many?
I think we're looking at something in the 70 to 80 range.
And that would require how many additional staff?
We would like to have our ratio at around 10 to 1. So that's where if we have 7, 7 covers between 65 and 75. If we get, and it all depends on the number of children who are in it. If we have 80 children, we'd like to have 8 staff.
So that would just replace the existing.
Yes.
Okay.
And do we provide any scholarships to low-income families?
If we provide assistance for any family who needs help with any of our recreation programs.
Okay. And when you talked with the parents about increasing the rate, what was the sense, and like how many parents participated? Because
it was the 6 to 10 parents who participated, and they were fine. I know Kevin has talked to Dee Dee, who also talked to a number of parents, and the sense was that going up to 160 would be acceptable at this point in time. But I fully understand Councilmember Conway's perspective. It's one of those things that we did have some issues on the first day of school. A lot of parents who did not sign up because in the past we've just been allowed. We haven't had that need, but we did start sign-ups in April. We did contact parents who had not signed up, who had been on the list, who had previously been there, and they just figured that they could just drop in even though they hadn't assigned. And we tell all of our parents every year that you need to re-sign up because we need to make sure all of your contact information is correct and that you're doing, and everything that we have is correct. And I think some parents from the past have said, basically thought that my contact information didn't change, so therefore I don't need to recontact the city. And up until the week before the school, we were not full. It was a matter of, I think it was. I'm going to look at Kevin because I know we talked about it. I think 3 days. Yeah, I think a week before we had 30. And that last week, 30 people signed. 30 people we allowed in that last week, and more tried to sign up.
Okay. Other council questions?
Yeah, I do, Madam Mayor.
Are you-
Are you finished, Terry?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Under on the second page, under discussion, the third paragraph down at the bottom, it talks about the various costs per hour. So currently, right now, parents are paying $1.69,
Right. So if you have your child there from 2:30 to 6 o'clock, it'd be $1.69 an hour.
and if it goes to $160, it'd be $2.23 an hour.
Yes.
So if you're a parent who's got a kid in kindergarten, the kid's there from the beginning to the end. That's about $8 a day. If it went to $160.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you have on the back side different rates from other cities.
Yes.
I mean, that rate is outrageously cheap. But then there are other cities that charge even less. It appears. Or am I making an assumption based on this?
No. Daly City charges $96, and San Bruno charges $125.
$125. I had reached out to, or actually, Dee Dee reached out to me, and we've talked about the program, and from what she was telling me, that there is this desire to have these enrichment programs besides just having that free time, and so then in the staff report at the top of the second page, it says that it appears that the Park and Rec Commission is going to come back in April and kind of assess some of these enrichment programs and kind of come up with another fee structure to pay for these additional programs.
Right. So what we're looking at right now is as we bring in the enrichment programs that have additional cost, that they would be for parents and children who want to participate, and they would pay for it just like you do with the BES after school program. So that way parents can have an option as to what they would like. If what we find is that we are getting overly subscribed for the enrichment programs, we might look at trying to say, okay, how do we incorporate this more into the day-to-day? And if we do that, and there's an additional cost to the city to bring in outside instructors, what do we do? And I think one of the things that the parents have been very happy about this year is that we have really concentrated more on creating different types of programs by our staff. So we do some free time, we do some active activity time, and we do some arts and crafts. We've always done those kinds of programs, but part of it is the way we communicate with the parents is changing. We're being much more proactive in our communication and trying to communicate more often with our parents.
I think that's smart.
One of the in addition to me meeting with the parents once a month, our senior recreation leader started the program of meeting with the parents once a month as well, so she can hear directly from the parents. But we're also putting together the packets of the work that the activities that they did for that week, so they can take that home with them, whereas in the past they kind of did it and left it. We've also put together a calendar so the parents know what to expect on a day-to-day basis. So, we're working really hard to build the trust back up, because as Clark said, I think the first week, we lost a lot of trust. I think over the last couple of years, parents have been, trying to get more activities. The challenge has always been, when you are charging less than $2 an hour for a program, it's really hard to have those have a lot of different varied activities. Also, the other challenge that we have is just trying to keep good staff.
Yeah.
Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, no, you did.
I think I danced. I felt
very,
like I danced
very
around
well,
it.
actually. And so, this program is at the school. So what type of partnering are we doing now, and what's some potential partnering opportunities with the school district?
We're working really hard to partner with the school district. There is the challenge as being an outside program from the school district is using their facilities because their classrooms are being used by their teachers. So especially during the school year, the teachers have their rooms set up in a certain way and are not very supportive of having somebody else come in, rearrange their classroom, do something different in their classroom that they would then may need to fix first thing in the morning. Teachers already as you know, teachers already have a lot on their plate. So the school district does let us use the cafeteria when it's raining, so that because as you know, we don't have space for all 65 children. We will be using one of their rooms for our instrument making class. I'm not sure how we're going to take on what we're going to do with the STEM class, but I've been working closer with the superintendent this year to work through that. We've also made better contact with the principal this year. Our senior recreation leader is in weekly communication with the principal. We are trying to work with the school district to have some of our staff participate in some of their trainings. The last training, unfortunately, happened on a day when our senior recreation leader had other obligations. But we're going to be told more of their training, so we can be part of their training, so we can try and provide consistent discipline throughout the day. The challenge being is that the level of discipline that you have and the level of attention you have in a school during the school day is different than what you want to have after school.
Yeah, you gotta blow off some steam.
Right. So, if the expectation is that we're going to be treating children the same as if they were in school all day long, that's not our job.
Yeah.
Our job is to provide children an ability to have activities to burn some energy at the end of the day. So, the way that you do that is different from the way you're going to be in school throughout the day. And that creates some level of tension between us, our program, and the school district.
Yeah.
And it's just going to happen. But we are trying to work better with them. We're trying to, make sure that if there's issues that are going on in school, we're aware of it. So if it gets carried out at our after-school program, we can stop it quicker. We're informing the school district of things that are happening in our after-school program, so it doesn't carry through the school day. So we are trying to create that better synergy between the two of us. But we serve two different functions.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think if we're really gonna have a thriving program there, and then just like with the Littman program, now we have so many people, so many kids that want to do it. I mean, it seems like there's going to have to be a very strong partner, stronger than what we currently have in regards to that synergy that you're talking about with the school district. So, we have our Park and Rec chair, Kevin, and just be thinking about that. How do we, really enhance our ability to work better with the school district and vice versa, and on those things.
Sure, Kevin, come on up. Chair of our Park and Rec Commission.
Always like to hear from you, Kevin.
Thank you. So for those out in TV land, I'm Kevin Fryer, Brisbane resident and chair of Parks and Rec Commission, and I got kind of thrown into the middle of this quite by surprise. Stuart has covered most everything quite well. I mean, his answers meet many of the discussions, but I would just touch on a couple of things. First of all, we were caught flat-footed. We can say that, but it's not entirely the city's fault. I want to come a little bit to the city's defense. The ability to hire people is something that's outside of our control. Mm-hmm. And even though sign-up for this program started in April of last year, the week before school there were only 30 kids signed up. And then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's a very large kindergarten class this year.
48.
And that caused this last minute. And that's nobody's fault. Parents obviously were really concerned. You all heard from them. We heard from them.
Yes.
But I do think that there is some good conversation happening, and they're beginning to understand, how it happened and so on. The size of the facility, and I know you guys are moving forward to putting a new facility up there, which will solve part of the problem. But the size of the facility is limited to how many kids can safely be in that program. And on Parks and Rec Commission, our first thing is safety first before everything else. The safety of the kids is the most important thing. There was a comment, I believe actually it was from Lori, that really, in one of these meetings, that really struck a chord with me and helped me to understand the importance of this. And that is that when people think about, when parents think about sending their kids to our local public school versus other options, one of the things that they actually look at is what is this after-school program, and the two are actually interconnected in terms of a parent's choice. And I had not really thought about that prior to this conversation, and I think that's important to keep in mind. In terms of moving forward, we had some good conversations. I did reach out to Dee Dee, and she went to Mothers of Brisbane to get a number of what is a reasonable amount to increase, to have a fee increase. And that is how we arrived at this 30%. That came from Dee Dee. I don't know how far and wide she did that, but I'm assuming that's 10, 15 people, parents who are engaged in this. But in our conversation looking forward, first of all, the $15 an hour minimum isn't bringing us a whole load of applicants. We're still quite understaffed. We also talked about moving forward in terms of having more enriched programs, that we might be looking in the future at hiring more qualified people. What does $15 an hour get you in terms of qualification? Well, it probably gets you somebody who's in school, who is studying child development or something like that. But this is their first job on their experience ladder. And if we are going to build a program that really does address this synergy between after-school program and education, further down the line, we may be looking at hiring people that cost more, even at the entry level. We all collectively thought that this is very, very inexpensive, and that's a good thing. I mean, it's good that we can do that. But even at this increase, it still is very inexpensive. And we actually had one of our rare 4-1 votes, in that one person really thought that it should be increased to 180.
I remember that.
Yeah, because of this, and we also thought about it in terms of two steps. That looking forward, if we get a larger building, we get staffed up, we are increasing the quality of the enrichment of these programs. That next year or in a year from now, that we might be looking at increasing it more to compensate for that as we build that program. So that's sort of the thinking and the conversation, the discussions that we had in regards to this. I do think, though, it seems to me from the first meeting I stepped into to the conversations that we've been having of late, that there is a good conversation now happening between city staff, commissioners, and the parents, who are very concerned with this program, and that's progress. That in itself is progress, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Kevin.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Kevin.
I have a question.
I'm done.
Are you done? Okay. So you had mentioned, Stuart, that the additional enhancements to the program that you're considering would only be available for students enrolled in Club Rec. And I'm wondering if you've thought about the fact that, like, if there's families that are interested in those programs, they may choose to enroll in Club Rec just to get those programs, which will then either increase the wait list or it might cause more staffing problems. So I'm wondering if you had considered having those programs also be open to the general student population, so that if parents wanted their students to be able to take advantage of this instrument making class or the STEM program, just one day a week, that they wouldn't have to enroll in the entire 5-day program.
Right. So the challenge for that would be is that there are a limited number of students who can participate based on what the teacher says. So it's not open to all comers. So, I think it's limited to 10 to 8 to 15 children for each of them. So if we're trying to make our program better, and we open it up to first come, first serve for anybody in the school, then it may not be, our program may not be any better. Because what would happen at that point in time, it would seem as if it's just as if it's academic chess or if it's the language program for the school. It doesn't seem like it's part of our program.
But you're saying these programs would be at an additional fee?
Yes.
Okay.
We could do it both ways, but the challenge, I think, is that the parents who are in the after-school program who are looking for additional enhancement that's a part of that program would say, I wasn't able to sign up because 6 other parents who are not part of your program signed up for it. And then they would come back to us and saying, you're not really offering us any enhancements. You're offering it to everybody, not our program. That's the challenge that we would face.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Are we discussing now?
I just have a quick question on what you brought up, Lori. So these enrichment classes, the STEM and the music instrument building, are there financial aid opportunities for folks as well? Is these classes?
I mean, it's going to be one of those things. Is we don't turn people away
all across the board.
Yeah.
So you get financial aid to if you qualify to be part of the rec program, and as well as taking these enrichment classes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So at this point, we're asking questions.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
All
right, we can go
I just
into-
want to make one thing clear. I don't have any kids or grandkids in the program. So I know how Brisbane is.
Yeah. I don't either, but even if I wanted to, it seems like there's a wait list.
It'll make that perfectly clear.
Yeah.
So, but I did volunteer my 5th grader to Stuart to escort kids, couple little kids down to Brisbane Dance Workshop on Mondays, but parents were willing to accept it because she is very responsible and really obeys traffic laws and uses the crosswalks and looks both ways and gets on her friends about it. So
Yeah.
That's good. I could see her doing that.
I know, you're trained. It's good. I mean,
That's good.
that you do it, and I see kids blow out of the library sometimes and shoot across the street. If I'm there, I go, hey, use a mean old man, use a crosswalk. But, I know my grandkids, they go up and they go around.
That's good.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, I have.
Chief, I don't. I'm mobily limited, so sorry.
Well, I just, as a personal note, I do have to say, my daughter, who's now at BES, has said, "Mom, I want you to sign me up for rec." And I said, "I'm sorry, there's a wait list." So maybe someday.
Yeah.
Madison?
Are we discussing now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm really excited to see this has come forward. These challenges have existed for a long time, not just since the beginning of this year or even, I think, staff related. But when I was on Park and Rec Commission, this did come to our attention. And of course, at that time I was doing a lot of babysitting. I babysat for probably 30 families in town. So I was picking up kids from rec all the time, and most of my parents had experience with rec, and we're just really looking for a lot more from the program aside from staffing, but the enrichment programs that have been discussed. And many of them just expressed to me, like, I would pay so much more just to have a program that, like, my kid wants to go to. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about the affordability, but it's about your kid being happy when you pick them up from rec, or not asking you if they can not go to rec, and really feeling like that time that they're spending after school is in like an environment that they're excited about. So I'm really excited to hear about a lot of the changes that are already being implemented, like having that calendar and having regular meetings with staff. I think it would be good. This was something that was mentioned back when I was looking at this issue. One of the things that came up was that like a lot of parents don't know who the staff are. They don't know their names or like their backgrounds or anything like that. So one of the proposed suggestions was to have like a wall inside that had like pictures of the staff members with their names, and then kind of like a write-up. I'm going to College of San Mateo. I'm studying biology or early childhood education. My favorite activity to do with the students at rec is kickball or something, just to kind of put a face to the name or put a name to the face, and to give parents more information about who's with their kids so they can feel like they can address them by name and ask questions and things like that, and email updates about what's going on. All of those things are just really minor changes that I think will really help the program. I'm very excited to hear that Stuart has given us an update that these are things that have been implemented. I'm so happy that staff is on top of it. And I think that, when we're just looking at increasing the rate is really to just cover having more help and more staff members there. It really doesn't tackle the issue of enrichment. And I think parents would absolutely spend more to give their kids a better experience. So I do think that that's something, and it sounds like that's something we'll contemplate later on down the line. But, I think that would be something that parents would be willing to take on if you could point exactly to that enrichment program. So I'm excited to hear about that. I'm fine with raising it immediately, but I'm totally cool to support Clark's suggestion as well and just give people time to get accustomed to it. But I think that it's a fee that parents should be able to manage. Like, if you hire a babysitter and she babysits your kids 2 or 3 times, you're already at that amount. So,
Yeah.
Anyway. But I'm really excited, and I would like to just ask, I'm sure that Park and Rec will get updated on this, but it would be great if, like, at some point we could get just an update on how things are going or what enrichment programs you do end up adding, or, there might be resources that we have. Obviously, I have connections with BDW, but we might have resources and might be able to think of people who could come in and offer some sort of class here and there. But I'd like to just get an understanding of, the things that are being added to the program, and to just make sure that this is something that we really stay on top of. So that's where I'm at.
Great. Thank you.
Taking a trip back down memory lane, I think about when I was a kid and how lucky we were in Brisbane, in a sense, from our recreation program, is because at that time the city didn't have any money, but the school district had a lot of money. And we had a real dynamic physical education teacher at school. His name was Rudy Benton. That's who the Benton games are named after. And so the city hired Rudy as their basic Parks and Rec director. He was the director of the program, and it was very sports oriented. But they also had a strong arts and craft program, which they hired local artists, and so it was a really robust program. And so that integration happened much easier. And Lisa, you were probably more in the tail end of it, but maybe but all that happened. And the recreation, the student leaders were hired locally, and they would hire the more supervisory folks from San Francisco State, because they had a strong program there at the time. So it was different time, and I think back then how lucky we were just to have that one guy that really kind of integrated everything, and you can't do that now. Just due to PERS and all this other stuff and all these regulations. Oh, sorry, you can't jump ship. You can't even teach, in the sense is, you can't work for the city if you work for the school, and so things have all changed, and it got kind of convoluted, so it makes it more difficult. And Kevin, I certainly appreciate what you guys you do, and the 160 is fair. I didn't say that it wasn't fair. I just felt we should step into it, and I still feel that way. I feel strong enough to say, if the rest of the council wants to go 160, that's fine, but I'm going to vote no just because I think that we should step into it. I think it's a proper method to do, because I'm not sure we're going to be there by January. I'd almost be willing to bet on it. Because I know, and it's not to the fault of our staff. I mean, it's just, it's the economy right now. And
We had 2 more applicants this week. I just found out from one of our staff. Yay!
2 more
Right
in
now?
addition to how many?
To the 2 that we
To the
had.
2.
We have 4 total?
Applicant.
Well,
Or applicant.
We have 2 that we're going to hire. We've got 2 more applicants that we still have to go through the process to see if
wonderful.
they're worth it.
Well, good. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, and I said $20 worth.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any further discussion?
No, I'm good with it. I'm happy to leave childhood play and recreation to people who know about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think that the amount that, $160, that's what the Park and Rec Commission came up with. That seemed to be a very fair amount to the parents. And, when you ask for more money later on, you're going to be looking at percentages. So it does make a difference. But, it's people are willing to pay for it. I think they have the disposable income for the additional amount, and we have the financial aid for those folks that couldn't. So I'm willing to leave it as is. So I hear where you're coming from, Clark, but I leave it just as is.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm really glad we're looking into this issue, and it's great to see that there's so many families that want to utilize rec, that there's so many more families coming into our school system. And Kevin's right. Like I said at the Park and Rec meeting, the after-school program and the quality of the programming there is a huge factor in many families' decisions on whether to send their kids to the public schools in Brisbane. My family, and I've spoken to actually many families who have opted for private school, and they have this perception that the after-school program is not as enriching as it could be, and so they opt for private school. So I think, I'm really, glad to see that we're working on improving that and that we're increasing the staffing. And the fact that the 30% fee increase suggestion came from Dee Dee, who surveyed the mob, and looking at the numbers, it's still very reasonable, and I'm comfortable with that, especially given that, there's an option for families that can't afford it to have a reduced rate. So I will entertain a motion. Do we need a motion to adopt the resolution?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2017-47 to increase fees for the after-school program from $120 a month to $160 a month per residence.
I'll second that motion. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oppose.
Any abstain? Okay, so let the record show it. It's 4-1 with Councilmember Conway opposed because he thinks it should be gradually increased. Okay.
Stepped into.
So, thank you very much. Move on. Okay, item B, under new business, consider potential implementation of a utility rate increase to create a drought reserve.
Right, so this is a smaller increase than the last one I've just brought forward to you. So this is a item that came before the subcommittee, the infrastructure subcommittee, a number of months ago, and it was due to the drought.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
So based on the drought, the city had a reduction in its utility revenue, in its money that it was getting from its water and sewer system, by $426,000. The reason for this is that we had 59,000 units less water used, mostly through the landscape meters, which is what we had asked for. Unfortunately, what that means is that we didn't bring in as much money as we needed to run the system in the same way. We were using reserves to cover the difference. The reason that we don't bring in as much money when the system uses less water is that 70% of our costs are fixed. Basically paying for bonds, paying for staff, paying for chemicals, all those things that you need to have, whether you run one drop of water through the system or thousands of gallons through the system. And then 30% is what we pay for the water or the sewer. This unfortunately is reversed from what we take in. 70% of our rate is fixed, and 30% is based on the amount of water that is used. So when less water is used, we bring in less money, and it doesn't really impact our expenditures in the same way. So there are two ways that we could do this. We could either increase rates during the drought, which seems counterintuitive to people. So what would happen is, as we're asking you to use less water, we would charge you more for the water you're not using, or that you are using, and that seems counterintuitive. So the other way to do it is to set aside money every year in anticipation of droughts. And that's what we brought to the subcommittee. The subcommittee said that did make sense, that trying to build up a reserve over a 4-year period would make sense as well. So that would be trying to set aside about a little over $100,000 a year. The subcommittee then went through a number of methods to try and figure out how best to take that across the board. And the method that they came up with to spread that $106,000 was that landscape meters would be charged $612 a year, or $102 per billing period. And then residential commercial users would be those who use more than the median, which is 72 units a year, would be billed $41.91 a year, or $6.99 a billing period. And those who use less than the median would be billed $13.91 a year, or $2.32 a billing period. As I said, this is a much smaller rate increase than what we were just talking about previously. The subcommittee also asked me what would happen for Altamar and Viewpoint users. And the reason being is that both Altamar and Viewpoint have landscape meters in addition to their residential meters. So they basically would be paying for both. That would be split out. So doing the calculation, the average cost for a resident Altamar would be about $45.67 a year, and at Viewpoint it would be $74.45 a year. And that's assuming that there are an equal number above and below the median. That would be the average increase for those two. The process for this is, if you give me direction to go ahead tonight, we need to mail out a letter to all users of the system and also to all property owners of the system. And that is not the same in all cases. So we do send out letters to both property owners and to the people who pay the bills if it's different. We have to have a 45-day waiting period between the time the letter goes out and when the council can act on it. At the time that the council can act on it, if more than 50% of the users have protested, then the city cannot implement the rate increase. We have done this in the past, and we have not had that issue, but we have had some questions after the letter has gone out, and staff has done the best it can to answer those questions at the city council meeting when we bring this item forward. So what we're asking for tonight is just the permission to go out with this rate, to let the users of the system know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the potential increase to the users would be. And the cost for the mailing is about $2,500 plus staff time. Hopefully that was enough, and if you have any questions, more than happy to answer.
Thank you. Questions?
I have one question for you, please, Stuart.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, when we are determining the capital charge and basing services, it says in our staff report that it's using the same 4 months, that this rate would be calculated based on the same 4 months as the capital charge. What are those 4 months?
I believe it is February through May. Although I was told today by the person who does utility billing that with our new system we can actually do that. We can do the average for the full year, and that probably would make more sense, as opposed to just doing it a 4-month period, because that way you capture people who use extra, additional water during the summer for their landscape when it's on the same meter. So it might make more sense to do this over a full year, in the median use for the full year, versus over just a 4-month period.
Would we need to put that in?
We would.
The disclosure of
yes.
How that would be calculated, because it's unclear to me. I worked on the subcommittee, and it's been a few months since we did so.
I think it's been 6 to 9 months.
But it was something that we felt this would be the best way to capture the revenue to tide us over during drought years, even though many people feel that water is very expensive. It's hard to understand the infrastructure that goes into it and the extreme costs that it costs to maintain the system. So all those things were very good. And then once we get a reserve, would this fee then be relaxed until a drought situation happened, or would we anticipate building this reserve past the amount that we are looking at right now?
I would recommend that we would probably want to leave it in place for at least 6 years, so we have at least a year and a half of a drought available in the reserve, would be my thought, because as we found from the last drought, it wasn't just a 1-year issue. It was closer to a 2-year issue. And everything that we're hearing from science is that as we go further down, the droughts will
get worse.
Yeah, longer cycles.
Well, and also with more water savings that we're able to do in new construction and with retrofits, we're going to have this problem of more infrastructure costs versus less revenue.
Right, and that's, I think, is the positive move that the City Council made a few years ago when they implemented the capital charge for it to replace its infrastructure, where it is more of a fixed rate. So we are slowly trying to move the ratio of fixed revenue to variable revenue to be closer to the fixed cost to variable cost. This was an issue that I think we started looking at. Councilmember Conway might be able to help me. Probably in 2009, we may have started looking at this issue in the infrastructure subcommittee, and we just haven't found a really good way to really, you don't want to switch to 70-30 the other way all at once. And the reason being, for those people who use very little water, they would have a large increase in their bill. So I think with the first step that you took 3 years ago with the capital charge, as we start implementing the capital charge over time, we'll start moving that ratio so we're not going to have the same kind of impact as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Work in progress. Just can't get there overnight.
No. I don't have any questions. I really just have a comment. I think the subcommittee did a great job, and I in total support. In fact, I'd even make a motion to implement the utility rate increase in the form of a drought reserve and direct staff to implement the public outreach that's necessary.
Okay. Any questions, discussion? Okay. Thank you to the subcommittee. It's a step in the right direction.
Do we want public comments?
Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I remember the 300% rate increase for utilities, and at that time, we were comparing our rates to everybody else, and I really would like to know what other communities do about drought reserves, if indeed anybody does that. And this goes back to the whole structure of our utility being backwards in that it charges every single small family user the same amount as a larger business in Brisbane. You get 1 unit expense, or one, you're talking $45. Well, $45 to me is a whole lot more than $45 to a business here that for whom water might even be part of their production, such as a brewery or whatever. So I think that the language for this is regressive, that it's really the onus of the drought reserve should be on the big users of the water, not just everybody in Brisbane. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second? Or is there any questions? We want staff to respond.
I mean, it's if I'm wrong, doesn't it say that large users, are required to pay a much higher rate, $41.91 a year, compared to those who use much less, which is at $13.91?
Correct. So if you have a landscape meter, because it's the landscape meters that cause a lot of the issue, they're going to be paying $612 a year, as opposed to a residential user who uses less than the median. The person who uses less than the median would pay $13.91 a year.
I think there's a big difference between the big guys and little guys. So, thank you.
So, being part of the subcommittee, I guess I'll make the motion to approve sending out a letter.
There's already a motion.
Oh, there is?
You want to second it?
Oh, okay. Did you
Cliff
make
made
the
the
I
motion?
did make the motion.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Cliff.
I thought you guys did a great
All right,
job.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to item
Had a
C.
space moment there.
Information report concerning restricting the uses of properties within Brisbane acres that the city owns. Staff report, please.
Mayor, Mayor and Council, Council had requested some information about whether properties within the Brisbane acres that the city currently owns could be restricted in such a way that the properties would remain undeveloped essentially in perpetuity. The Open Space and Ecology Committee made a similar request, and last year I presented some information to the committee and described to them what I'm going to describe to you here in a moment, and they asked the matter, be forwarded to the council for the council's consideration as to whether or not any additional steps should be taken to restrict the uses of the property. There are about 110 parcels within the Brisbane acres area, and of those, the city owns 44 parcels, not counting our water tank sites. Of those 44, there's 29 that the city purchased or acquired through federal or state funds, and in connection with those, there are significant restrictions with respect to the use of that property to be used for only habitat preservation and open space purposes. And to remove those restrictions would involve the consent of those funding agencies, and that's very unlikely. Accordingly, of those 29 parcels, we don't think that anything else would really be necessary or required to restrict their use. Concerning the 29 parcels, or with respect to any parcels the city might acquire through a process other than through a federal or state agency, the memo outlines several different approaches, and I'll describe those. One would be a conservation easement. This is a recorded agreement between the property owner, here the city, and a qualified public or private entity that would protect the character of the land. Basically, the city would retain fee ownership of it, but an easement would be granted for purposes to restrict the use of the land for either open space or habitat purposes. This is often this is often used with respect to historic and agricultural purposes, but it could also be used for the open space or the habitat purposes as well. The drawback typically with granting a conservation easement is that that easement holder has a fiduciary duty to make sure that the property is used only for the purposes of the easement. And because that means some involvement with that easement holder to go out and make sure the property is being used, typically that easement holder will require that a funding source, such as an endowment, be created so that there is money available on an ongoing basis, basically in perpetuity, to make sure that the easement holder can carry out its fiduciary responsibilities. There's also perhaps a practical problem of trying to find an organization that the council feels would be able to carry that out on a long-term basis. Another method that could be used would be to convey the property in fee to a public entity or to a land trust. For example, it could be granted to the county of San Mateo, and with the restrictions that the city would put on with respect to its use. The difficulty there, of course, is that then that either the county or the public agency or the public or the land trust that might accept it would have the same responsibilities as basically the easement holder, and might not want to take on that responsibility. In addition, because the city currently owns the property, it has undertaken extensive efforts to maintain the properties with respect to keeping out non-native species and to reduce fire hazards. If the property were owned by a different entity, public agency, etc., the city would lose control over those maintenance efforts. A third item could be a declaration of restrictions, much like the city requires a developer to do in terms of conditioning or creating restrictions on the property with respect to the use. It would be a recorded document such that if someone really wanted to buy the property, they would know that there are certain restrictions with respect to its use. The difficulty there, of course, is that a future council could cause that declaration of restrictions to be terminated, even though politically that just may not happen. So therefore, there is a problem that the declaration of restrictions couldn't be guaranteed in perpetuity, that the land wouldn't be developed for a different purpose. The other concept might be to general plan or zone the property in such a way that the regulations would be such that it could only be limited to open space, and land uses inconsistent with that would not be permitted. Again, the difficulty that we see there is that that designation would apply just not to city-owned property, but to also private property owners. Some property owners may look at that as a taking of property because essentially the land would be restricted to open space or habitat conservation purposes, which could potentially deprive them of all economic use of the property. Accordingly, if we looked at these methods, probably the best choice of all of them would be the conservation easement if the city were willing to create an endowment such that there would be funds available for the easement holder to undertake its fiduciary responsibility. Another method that the city could look at if it's interested in acquiring additional parcels, and if there isn't state or federal funding, or if there aren't people who are currently willing to sell their property to the city for this purpose, would be to create an open space district. This is similar to be a separate governmental entity, much like the Guadalupe Valley Municipal Improvement District is a separate entity, but the council basically wears the same hat. In order to form such a district, you have to go through LAFCO. The city could initiate that, although it could also be initiated by registered voters within the area. Districts have the power to issue bonds, to acquire open space parcels, and with voter approval within the district, debt service could be assessed against the various parcels within the district. Some of the biggest difficulties with creating that is that LAFCO typically is resistant to creating new districts unless there's a compelling need, and private property owners may resist creating such a district because they would be concerned that their properties might be acquired by the district, and or even if they weren't acquired, their properties could be assessed with the debt payments if there were bonds floated, for example, in order to acquire the property. So again, this matter is before the council for information, and if the council feels some direction is appropriate with respect to either the restrictions or the creation of the open space district, we would be glad to undertake those additional steps. And I'll be glad to answer any questions on these items.
Madam Mayor. I think right at this moment, it's probably premature to make a decision on which direction to take. But there's some additional information that I'd like to see. That would be, okay, we have an open space plan that in it is identified the prime parcels that are targeted for open space, so to speak, right? I'd like to see a map. I know we've done the map where we colored in what the city owns, and it's about 50 acres or so. But on that map, I'd like to see how many were tied with the grant funds in one color, what the city purchased on its own in another color. And the purpose of that is there may be parcels that are so landlocked that they're going to be in perpetuity anyway. If they're stuck in between the granted parcels, the ones that we use the grant money on, then really those are kind of landlocked. And it may be pared down to just a few parcels. Then it may make sense to do the conservation easement to where we're not putting a whole lot of money into the conservation of those parcels, and that would be the purpose of it. So it kind of need that information to kind of see what kind of decision where we wanted to go. The second thing is it's all said and done because this all started 20 years ago, 20-something years ago, that if we acquired all the parcels that we set out to acquire, or wish to acquire, I should say, we're butted up against the state and county park, basically. So, is there a chance you could deed that to state and county park lands to where they would never be developed? Not overturned, I guess you could say, by the county board of supervisors or state legislators to say, nope, sorry. I mean, could we deed restrict it that way? That's a question. And that's a legal question you'd probably have to research. So, it's some point in time to come back with that, and maybe run it back through the Open Space and Ecology Committee with those maps, and so we can kind of look at it, And I think a picture's worth 1,000 words on how we move forward. That's my suggestion.
Through the mayor.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
You said that you brought this to the Open Space and Ecology Committee, and that they had sent it back for our information. Did they have a recommendation from that presentation?
They really did not. I think they thought that that many of the options, for example, the conservation easement or the conveying the property to another public agency or a land trust would be the most restrictive, but they were concerned about, on the conservation easement, the issue of cost, and with respect to conveying the property in fee, that the city would lose control over the activity of maintaining the property, etc. So I think the committee seemed to think that if there were need for additional restrictions, and I'm not sure I heard a convincing that they were convinced that there needed to be, but I think they wanted the council's input about if the council felt, A, that more restrictions were required, and B, if so, if the council had a particular preference.
Okay. I will add this to the council because when I was on CCAG and we had a meeting that was discussing housing, a couple of the members of the board did bring up making housing available on some of our lesser utilized parks. And that did come up, and it was somewhat looked askance at by most of the members of CCAG, but not by all. So just because property is in the state or county park system does not truly protect it, depending on where legislative and government bodies really want to go, because it can be changed just like anything we may put as far as a restriction can be changed by a future council or by the sitting council at the time. So I would just be very cautious with that, and I think that for me, I really liked Clark's idea to get a look at the map and see, because it's 44 that we own, 29 with public funds, and just the 15 remaining, that where the location is really makes a big difference. And I've seen other properties that were put into a land trust, namely Gilroy Hot Springs, that were purchased by the Nature Conservancy as a gift through a tax scheme. They held it for a year, did a bioassessment, turned it over to the state, who immediately applied bulldozers to it because they didn't want the risk of the historical buildings. And so that was an unintended consequence of putting the land into this conservation mechanism that backfired for that property and for the historical conveyance that the property owner was really looking for. So I think there's a danger in many of these methods, and it's really going to take a really special and hard look to find a airtight, if it's even possible, to find an airtight solution to this. And I think it is more a matter of the council being aware of the public's want to keep them as open space.
Yeah, I agree with you, Terry. I don't, just reading this, I didn't see any airtight ways of guaranteeing without a shadow of a doubt that the area, that the Brisbane Acres would stay open space. I think if anyone's going to be the best stewards of the land, it's going to be us.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean our former supervisor, Adrian Tissier, said, well, with the housing crisis, maybe we should be looking at some of the county's open space because the county has so much open space for housing, which is, a very, is not a smart move because you want housing where transit is, not in the open space areas. We've had enough urban sprawl. We don't need any more.
Certain Congress or senators and stuff.
Yeah. So, looking at this, the only one that kind of made sense and was more of a symbolic gesture is C, where you just have this declaration of restrictions. But as the city attorney has said, a future council can make the change, just like the current Trump administration is attacking national monuments that past presidents, had preserved as public land for the enjoyment of those lands as natural places, not places that would be abused and taken for profit by mining companies and oil companies, right? But and maybe that's the reason why the Open Space and Ecology Committee didn't have a recommendation, because they kind of felt the same way. So I don't need to have another another bite at this apple or even look at a map. To me, I think we got a good system in place, and I think our future councils will respect that. But if we wanted to take just one step further and doesn't cost us any money, I would move forward with C.
Okay. Madison?
I'm 100% in agreement. I think we need to leave it under our control as much as possible. I think we will do what's right. I know we will. I have faith in future councils. And like, oh my gosh, what a way to initiate a recall that would be. I mean, like, I just think our town would come unglued. And I think that has really been part of the culture of Brisbane that has sustained over decades. And I don't see that something that fades away in any shape or form. I think that, like, if you are on city council, I think that, like, there is an expected respect that you have for our mountain and for open space.
Who we are.
So, yeah, it's absolutely who we are. And I have faith that future leaders in our city will carry on, those beliefs and values as well. So I'm not in favor of any of the options besides, what Cliff mentioned, and having that sort of declaration, always knowing that, like, a future council could undo that. But I think it would be politically suicide for them anyway. But especially if there's something on the books that, like, they would have to be undoing something.
Sure.
That just made it really clear how the past, how past council members have viewed this. So I'm in favor of that, but I wouldn't be in favor of anything else. It doesn't matter where the land is. Like, if
Would
it's
you
landlocked.
be amenable to the map?
Sure.
Yeah.
But,
I
I don't think it's going to change how I feel.
No,
But I think
yeah,
we
I think
can get it.
I think it gives us a good idea of
Sure.
what's landlocked, and what you know what I mean. It gives future council something to look at and say, well, not much you could do here anyway. But it also gives us an idea of doing the inventory and send it back to the open space committee to just kind of look at it and so that we're all kind of on the same page in a sense of what we really have.
Yeah, I mean, every time that we're considering purchasing another piece of the acres, we look at that map. And we see what's left and what the restrictions are.
Yeah.
The
We
properties.
just had a recent potential acquisition again, but didn't go through.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm in agreement. I mean, I think the best way to, preserve the mountain is for our city to retain, that control. And I completely agree with what everyone said about, the risks of giving it up to state and county parkland. So,
Well, I wasn't saying risk. All I was asking is if we could actually restrict it. If you did something like that could you restrict it such to where they couldn't do anything ever? You know what I mean?
right, and I mean, that's what the suggestion was.
Yeah, that's
The fear that there might be a council in the future elected that would want to undo everything that we've done. But I agree with Madison, that's where a recall would come in. And, I just don't see that being politically the right thing to do for anything.
If there was an option, that would work, but all of them have drawbacks. It's not like there's one option that's really the clear.
There's nothing that jumps out
winner.
really. I mean, because but that's what's coming down the pike to me. What we've experienced with our legislature. I'm talking about the whole state legislature, not our legislators, but that's what's going to happen in the next generations. They're going to start going after the open space. We need housing. Look at that. Cut them trees down. Build a freeway. Build a tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like we have consensus on moving forward with item C, recording a declaration of restrictions. So,
And getting a map.
and having
Doing the map.
Okay. So do you have enough clear direction on that? Okay. Okay. So moving on to staff reports, city manager's report of upcoming activities.
Two quick items. One, just one more time on the Veterans Day event next Thursday at 8 a.m. at the community park. And the second is a reminder to everyone that the annual winter cleanup is this weekend, November 4th and 5th. Cleanup is for green waste only, not garbage or plastic bags or anything other than green waste. We will have staff available on Saturday from 10 to 3 and on Sunday from 9 to 1. And for the location of dumpsters, you can go on our website. And this has always been a very popular program, and we anticipate it will be again this year.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
As usual, you plan a green waste day, and it is expected to rain. And I said during the drought, we just need to have more of those green waste days so that we get a little bit of rain.
Last year.
I was going to ask you about if we were going to have some trucks patrolling or able to have pickup for people with large items that can't get to the dumpsters as we had in the past. And is that the 10 to 3 and 9 to 1 possibility?
Well, we will have staff available. I would just generally say that if we've done it in the past, I'm sure we'll be able to do it again this year.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Got more staff now.
Okay. All right, moving on to mayor and council matters. Item A, countywide assignments, subcommittee reports. Anyone have anything to report?
Nothing since last Monday.
I have nothing to report, but I did have something. I didn't know like where the most appropriate place to bring it up would be. It was something that was like brief. I don't know. You'll tell me if I can get into this because not on the agenda, but it was something that was brought up last meeting. You had in passing kind of brought up like compensating Lisa Greenlee for the mural.
Yes.
And so I had talked to various members of G3, and that mural really is like a group effort. So they would kind of prefer if there was sort of like compensation made, they would like it to be made in the form of a donation, because that will go like to the paints and stuff. And then she's giving her time, but they're like all as a team working to prepare the space. So I don't know if we want to put that on an agenda to review, if that's something we do want to do, but I just got feedback from the group since you brought it up.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I did communicate with Lisa Greenlee, and she said that her time was donated, but she would be glad to accept, reimbursement for the cost of the paint. So I asked her just let us know what that costs.
Perhaps if we could make it at a future meeting, make an allowance for a certain amount of materials from Brisbane Hardware or something like that, and maybe bring it back to the council for an authorization for an amount not to exceed, for their efforts towards materials might be a good way to address that.
Yeah, I think that's a good channel. We should just make sure they can get their paints there, though. The paints.
Doesn't the council have a fund to pay for things like this if the council thinks it's fit to do so?
There is money available. I know 30,000 of that is set aside for the Star City Festival. So I know last year the Star City Festival made back some of that money, so we can use some of what we made back last year to cover material like this. If that's the count, we can bring that back to the city council.
Good.
Great.
Speaking of the Star City Festival, will we be getting a report back on how that was, or what kind of numbers, or any of that, or has that come back to a subcommittee only?
haven't had it.
Sorry to jump in. I actually talked to Jimmy Leslie about this a couple weeks ago, and Cliff's been in the middle of campaigning. I've been traveling. Jimmy's been traveling, and he had another festival right after. So we've all been really busy. But I did talk to Jimmy. He absolutely wants to have a follow-up meeting with the subcommittee to really get into the nuts and bolts and all the fine details, and then potentially after that, a summary to the council.
Okay.
If you guys are
been out too because of having her child.
So, Noreen, that's one of the other big things. Noreen was on maternity leave, so we were waiting for her to get back so that we could schedule something. But that is on the radar. Totally. We would probably
right?
It's all right.
Yeah.
Yes, she came back
Yeah.
last week.
So we'll probably have it like start at the subcommittee and then have like a report to council also.
Which subcommittee
Great,
is
thank you.
Cliff and Madison.
that? A
I don't know
Park
what
and Rec
committee it is.
No, I thought it was an ad hoc
Ad hoc.
committee.
Oh,
Okay.
was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess
Okay.
so.
Well, maybe we could bring an amount back at a requested amount for, in support at our next meeting for the G3 projects.
Yeah,
That'd be
that'd be
good.
good. Yeah, I saw Sue Cochran out at Julie's yesterday. She did all the caulking, doing all the prep.
good.
So yeah, it was. The canvas is looking like it's ready to go.
Do we have any idea what the image is going to be?
I don't. I mean,
It's
it's private
be
property,
surprised.
so.
Okay.
Can't
All right.
remember.
I don't want to drag this meeting on longer.
Okay, so any other subcommittees or?
You know, we had our economic development
Yep.
subcommittee. Mitch gave a very good report, and there's a potential company that would lease the 7,000 Marina building. That's the white one. Sounds like they'd be a great tenant, and we'll see what happens with that. And yeah, I guess that was kind of like the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Moving on to item B.
Wait.
Sorry, was there anything else?
I guess it'd be item B, city council meeting schedule that I'd have a
Okay.
comment.
That's where we are now. City council meeting schedule. So we have a meeting scheduled for November 16th. December 7th is canceled, and then we have one on the December 14th. December 21st is canceled.
You usually have for lack of a better term, a pre-meeting to the reorganization meeting. So I
Right.
think after next Tuesday and we know who's involved, we can reach out and see what days might work.
Yes. Yeah, so we can't really do that right now.
Why
Nope.
doesn't
Robbie.
16th work as the pre-meeting?
Pardon me?
Isn't that a pre-meeting?
Um,
The 16th? Isn't that a
No,
pre-meeting?
No,
A pre-meeting to talk about your reorganization.
Rotation.
Oh, is that like closed session?
No, it's not a closed
No.
session. We usually do it in the conference room, but it's open to the public.
Oh, okay.
It makes
So can we
that-
just do it like before? Does it have to be
No.
a separate day, or
It
can we
should-
do it on the 16th?
I mean, November 16th.
well, the only problem is then if someone is expecting to be vice mayor or mayor, they would have no time to prepare or to have special family or get-togethers.
What?
She's saying November 16th, 1 month before the reorganization.
We
Like
could
if we just
potentially do
did it
that.
at 6:30 instead of, I'm trying to figure out a way so we don't have to like add
I
another
agree.
day that we all have
We're
to
going to
be
have
here.
a closed session.
If you could hold on for a second.
Go ahead.
So,
Oh.
I mean, the election itself doesn't get certified until 30 days, so depending on how close the election is, you may or may not be ready to do it on the 16th.
But theoretically, the person who is getting elected is not necessarily going to be the mayor or the mayor pro tem, correct?
No, but we've had
No, but they
situations
vote on
where it
Oh,
and I've been on this council.
you're right. You're right. You're right. Okay.
It did
fine.
happen that way.
So what's
Okay.
the soonest we can do that? If you're saying 30 days?
Well, 30 days is
From
when the
the 7th.
official,
I'm just trying to
timeframe. So when we come back on the
Trust
6th,
me, that's the.
well, let's see what happens
All right.
Tuesday, and
All
then
right.
we can go from there.
Okay.
I just was trying to make it easy. But I guess I'm making it harder.
Well, no one
it's
asked
okay.
you to try to make it
It's
easy.
okay.
Yeah.
Whatever you
There's
want.
no easy allowed.
Whatever you want to do. I don't care.
All right. So then we'll move on to item C, written communications. We received non-Baylands related written correspondence from Tony Varios on November 2nd. And we are at oral communications number 2.
Motion to
No
adjourn.
one's in the audience.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.